Jesus Christ, where the fuck do I even begin? Hi, and welcome back to Hell. In today's rant video, I want to discuss how the game is doing since we're about to head into September. I'll be sharing my thoughts on the recent Forbidden and Limited list that just dropped in late August, talk about where the community needs to go from here, and preview some of the work I've done lately to justify my investment in this train wreck of a game. There's quite a bit that we'll need to go over, and I want this video to be as brief as possible considering that I want to get back to work on my other projects. Also, apologies in advance if my voice sounds off. I'm dealing with a sinus infection, so I have a bit of a frog in my throat. The state of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is something I addressed in my previous rant video on this game. But to briefly summarize, there's three key issues that people have been primarily complaining about, which are responsible for the slow decline of this game and its player base. These three issues are the current meta, the price of cards, and the awful prize support. One thing I want to get out of the way now is that my thoughts regarding prizing has kind of shifted a bit. While I'm not opposed to overhauling the prizes at tournaments, I do think it wouldn't be that much of an issue if the competitive game was a lot cheaper to begin with. Furthermore, no one can really seem to agree on what prizes Konami should be giving out. So for this section of the video, I just want to focus on these first two talking points. The price of cards is something that has been discussed to death at this point. I already shared some of my thoughts before in a previous video, but it's worth reiterating. Konami's main problem is that their current product model doesn't really provide a clear path for consumers to be able to build a competent deck and participate at locals. What usually happens whenever you buy sealed product is that you either pull packs and end up with a bunch of awful horse shit, or you buy 3 structure decks and hope to God that the archetype it's built around can maneuver through the current meta. This is opposed to games like Magic the Gathering, which contains sets that are built with draft formats in mind, not to mention that they're constantly pumping out multiple pre-constructed decks with each set that releases designed around casual play. Simply put, it's fucking ridiculous that you can't just open a single booster box and build a competent deck. And in the case of structure decks, they're only as good as the cards they provide and the meta that surrounds it. Now obviously I'm aware that you should be purchasing singles online if you're going to build physical Yu-Gi-Oh decks. The point that I'm trying to get to is that for a beginner just looking to get into the game, there should always be a product model in place that allows for them to get a taste of what modern Yu-Gi-Oh has to offer, akin to something like the tactical tri-decks in the OCG. Ideally, the best way to achieve that would be to lower the barrier to entry. Whether that means producing multiple structure decks, replacing pack filler with targeted reprints of entire deck cores, or providing cards and booster sets at multiple different rarities, there should always be a way to jump straight into the modern game without having to take out a loan. The next major issue is the current meta. Like I said in my previous video, we've dealt with numerous lopsided formats for the past 2 years. Both the current Snake Eye meta and the Ishizu Tier Limit meta were each considered Tier 0 formats, and while Kashtira wasn't Tier 0, it still gate-kept a lot of decks from participating in the format. However, for as oppressive as Tier Limits and Kashtira were, they were only the most dominant deck in the room for maybe a few months. Snake Eye, on the other hand, is basically the modern-day Teledad, a deck that has far overstayed its welcome and a deck that Konami refuses to kill. I shit you not, we are currently almost 7 months into this format. That all being said, we actually did receive a ban list today as of writing on August 31st, the literal last day of the month. And I do have both positive and negative things to say about it. So let's go over this real quick and discuss what has changed.
Okay, on to the next one. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamity. People are playing synchros these days?
First off, the banned cards are all excellent. It's exactly what needed to be hit. The only thing really missing here is Shifter. Overall, this section does a great job of taking out a lot of bullshit cards that have been used to effectively steal games. Next we have our limited cards, and it's here where I started to question what the fuck Konami was thinking. Let's talk about Poplar and Ash. So, the way that Konami has gone about addressing Snake Eye is by bottlenecking the deck and reducing the amount of interruptions with its end board. From what I've been told by other Snake Eye players, apparently the bans and limits are substantial enough in the current meta that it has pushed Snake Eye below Yubel in terms of viability. What this analysis fails to take into account, though, is that the Snake Eye deck is about to receive another huge wave of support in Rage of the Abyss, which is literally only a month away. So, basically, we only get a single month where Snake Eye is a reasonable Tier 1 deck, and then it'll return to being the most oppressive thing in the fucking room. To add insult to injury, Konami also made good on limiting Pot of Prosperity. The issue with this, however, is that because they didn't hit Snake Eye and Yubel hard enough on this list, all this is going to do is make all the rogue decks in the room severely more inconsistent than the meta decks in the room. Personally, I would have waited to limit Prosperity if Konami was going to go this route, but I'm not the one in charge of things here. Beyond that, pretty much everything else in the limit section is pretty good. Eva at 1 fucking terrifies me since I hate Drytron, but it's probably not going to do much of anything in a format like that. I will say that limiting Branded Fusion feels incredibly late. I personally would have preferred if they had just banned Sanctifier and left Branded Fusion alone, but I guess this is fine too. Feel free to prove me wrong though, I'd love a reason to ban this fucker. What really boggles my mind though is Grass coming back to 1. I'm already a little torqued that there wasn't any Zodiac on hits, considering it's doing jack shit in Master Duel. But seeing Grass at 1 just makes no sense to me. It's an unfathomably strong card. Even if you were to cite it in going second as basically a second copy of Foolish Burial in a deck like Tearlament, you would still be milling quite a lot of cards. Under that logic, you may as well have just unbanned Chaos Ruler instead. At least then it wouldn't be luck dependent. The semi-limit and unlimited section really aren't anything of note. I guess Lunalight Tiger is at 2 now. Colossus is now at 2 copies, which will be very annoying if we ever get another Tier 1 Thunder archetype. And beyond that, I guess Plushfire is back with an errata. Overall, I am a little optimistic about these changes. The Apollosa, Beatrice, and Lacrima hits are all massive in terms of nerfing the scope of the Fiendsmith endboard, and it keeps Engraver from being yet another 1-card starter in Snake Eye. My take on the situation is that I'm expecting Yubel to be the best deck in the room. Snake Eye is still going to be fucking insane once the Azumina cards come out, but I personally struggle to see why the deck would still want to run Fiendsmith if it can't help funnel into their endboard. I'm actually rather excited to see how the Snake Eye deck evolves after all these bans and limits. But despite that, I am still worried that these changes may not be enough to improve attendance at events. I know that I and many others have been having a lot of issues with how tight the current meta is. Some people just want to be able to take their pet deck to an event and be able to perform well if they're a good pilot, and that's just not very feasible really in this meta. Unless you're strictly on an anti-meta strategy, in other words a shifter deck, then you're pretty much just fucked. So if you aren't looking forward to the upcoming meta, you're probably wondering what options you have at your disposal as a participant of this hobby. Well, there's a few things you could probably do to kill time if you aren't having fun. The first, I guess, would be to voice your concerns to the company on social media. I'm going to be honest, the horse meme has been really funny, and while I get it's been grossing people out, it's such a clear and direct way of showing dissatisfaction towards the game and its management. But even if you don't want to engage in mass trolling, word of mouth always helps as well. Whether that means directing people to alternative formats, or advising them to wait until the current format improves before buying new products, it's probably better for everyone's sanity and wallets if they spend their money elsewhere for now. And on the topic of alternative formats, there's quite a few options to choose from. You have Time Wizard formats like Goat and Edison, along with more wacky formats like Domain or Junior format. And if you're playing online, you could always get some friends together and participate in a progression-style format using online pack openers. Another option you have is to just not play Yu-Gi-Oh! This is obviously the nuclear option, but it's probably the best one for your mental health, and it's the biggest incentive for Konami to get off their asses and do something about the format. But if you're a crazy person like me, then you've probably been looking for other ways to enjoy this hobby aside from the main format. So, for the remainder of this video, I'll be shamelessly plugging my upcoming project. Thank you for watching, and I'll be handing things off now to yours truly. Duelists of the world, hear me! Within the next few months, we at Kaiba Corp will be unveiling a brand new homebrew format for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. Current progress can be viewed in the Community tab, but to briefly summarize, this format will be utilizing Konami's Deckmaster format as a jumping off point. It will contain a legal Deckmaster list consisting of 100 monsters. It will support the current card pool up until the Infinite Forbidden. It will also boast an adjusted Forbidden and Limited list. There will be adjusted rules for normal summoning and flip summoning, as well as a comeback mechanic during the draw phase. Finally, this format will be designed to support 3 or more players in a single session, with rules for both the tag battle and free-for-all game mode. Do you have what it takes to survive until the end? I doubt it, but I look forward to seeing you try.